mine from me home I started, left the girls and two and nearly broken hearted, saluted father dear, kissed me darling mother, drank a pint of beer, me grief and tears to smothered enough to reap the corn and leaf, for I was born, got a stout blackthorn, the banished ghost and goblins, a brand new pair of brogues to rock the love of the bogs and frighten all the dogs on the rocky road. It's a double of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Want to hear and turn her down the rocky road and all the ways to double and whack for da.
Luke Kelly was born in Sheriff Street in Dublin in 1940. He was one of a close-knit family that included 3 brothers, 2 sisters and Luke's grandmother on his mother's side. Times were tough as money was tight, and the family, like many at the time, made their own entertainment.
We were one of the lucky families. There was quite a lot of hardship in that particular area. But our dad, Luke Sr., had a permanent job in Jacob's Biscuit Factory. So we weren't too badly off compared to maybe some of the other families. We had no radio or television in them days, as most people of that era wouldn't have had anyway. We'd kind of sit round, and he had this talent, our father, to sing Nego spirituals, Paul Robeson stuff. And we used to just sit round and join in, and that was the entertainment we had in those days.
Oh, come all ye tramps and the hawker lads, and gather ours a blow.
People told stories when they didn't have radio and television through songs. And there were rallying songs, there were play songs, there were songs that people used for games, and children knew how to entertain themselves with these songs. But earlier than that, there were songs relating to the Fenians and the Invincibles, and even 1913 and 1916, and people remembered the heroes of the past. So there was still that tradition in the 40s and 50s. The other thing that happened in Dublin that I think kept the tradition alive was the tradition of people after the pub closure, the half dozen, and then they went home to the house. And in the houses, people would sing songs, everyone did their party piece, and sometimes play a bit of music if they had music, and entertain themselves. So that was still a live tradition in the Dublin I grew up in.
The Kelly family's home life was abruptly brought to a halt when a fire engulfed their home, and they reluctantly relocated to the north side suburb of Whitehall, on the outskirts of their beloved inner city.
Our mum, who was born and reared in the North Wall area, she said, we're moving to the country. So I remember the first time we ventured, Luke and I had to make our way. We had to find where Whitehall was, really and truly. I think we had to get buses for the first time. And eventually we moved to Whitehall, lock, stock and barrel, and we moved into a 3-bedroom semi-detached house, which is still there today.
And he was never really comfortable with moving to Whitehall. And indeed, like a lot of the older people, used to come back into the city. And I remember people who went to Ballyfermot from the Liberties, they'd come in on the weekend to have a few pints, meet their old friends, and try and keep in touch with that community. And Luke was no different.
Life in Whitehall had some small compensations, however, one of which was the local weekend dance, the scene of Luke's very first public appearance.
There was an assembly hall around the corner in Whitehall where we used to go dancing. A kind of a local hop on a Saturday or Friday night or Saturday night. And they had a talent competition. The song Luke chose to sing was Pat Boone's Love Letters in the Sun. They were the songs of the time. That was my first recognition of Luke singing songs, really and truly.
From an early age, Luke was known for his restlessness, and by the late 1950s, at age 17, he left Dublin and travelled to the Isle of Man, before shortly thereafter moving to England.
He went to pagan England, that's what it was called. You were Irish and you stayed in Ireland, and you had your fáinne, and you had your pioneer pin, and the past is a foreign country. They do things differently. It's absolutely incredibly accurate. In this case, this was a deeply devout Catholic Ireland. He went to pagan England. In fact, when I got to pagan England in 1965, I thought it was fantastic. It was a great place altogether, and everybody was just cool. I mean, You were expecting people to have all the mark of the devil on them, but they didn't.
Still footloose and fancy-free, Luke decided to try his luck working on the buildings in the city of Leeds in the north of England, where his elder brother Paddy was already hard at work.
We got him fixed up in the digs, but then we had to get him fixed up with some work as well, which we did. He got a job on the site that we were working on, and he became what we call a trainee steel fixer. A bit naive, poor Luke was at that time, and somebody said to him, "You see that job you're doing?" He said, "Them fellas working on the third and fourth floor, they're getting a lot more money than you are." He said, "Is that correct?" So Luke, in his naivety, decided to do something about it, and he thought he'd go and see the site agent who was in charge of all the labour. So he went and saw the site agent, all right, told him he demanded what he thought he was worth. The next thing, he got a kick up the backside and he was sent down the road, sacked on the spot, and nearly got us sacked as well.
Fare you well, me lovely Nancy, for it's now I must leave you.
He went to stay with a family in Birmingham called Mulready's. And Sean Mulready had left this country under pressure from the clergy. He was seen to be a communist and a teacher, and it wasn't really popular in those days. And a lot of Irish emigrants had left, not just for economic circumstances, because they couldn't tolerate the repression of ideas that existed in the 40s and the 50s. The banning of books, the banning of artists, the social pressures on people. And through the Mulreadys, he would have made contacts with other young people. There was a growth in folk clubs in England in those days.
And at that time, I remember there was a folk club called the Star Folk Club, run by the great Scottish balladeer called Ian Campbell. I never even heard him talking about folk singing or anything. He was more into the Frank Sinatra, Perry Como stuff. But somehow or another, he took a shine to what he'd heard.
Despite displaying no particular interest in folk music, Luke was a regular at various music clubs in Newcastle. Early in 1960, he came across a group of English folk singers who, ironically, were performing a song that was as Dublin as could be.
I think it was the Old Triangle was the one that sparked them off. Listen, that was Brendan Behan's song from Brendan Behan's play, The Queer Fella. Luke heard that in a club in the north of England, in fact, and was amazed how powerful it was, and that attracted him to go back and start researching his own background and his own traditions.
That's where he got an education. And he would have met two types of people. He would have met the emigrant Irish who would have gone over on the cattle boat. And Luke would have been mixing with these people. He would have known these people. And they would have been maybe native Irish speakers who were trying to hold on to some sort of a sense of identity in Birmingham or Newcastle or wherever it was, or Luton or wherever. And also try and preserve a certain dignity as well, because, you know, no blacks, no dogs, no Irish, you know. So he was mixing with these people, and he would have been hearing, probably in the pubs, he was hearing their songs, Irish songs, traditional songs, that would have been brought over with them. And also, he came in touch with, through the folk clubs again, the songs of Hugh McCall, Peggy Seeger, and of course Ian Campbell. So he learned a repertoire over there. And that's the repertoire that we started to hear here when he brought it back.
With our nets and the gear we're fed.
Luke was now learning up to a dozen or so songs a week, and on his return to Dublin, his developing repertoire found a ready and willing audience as the ballad boom was beginning its meteoric rise.
The ballad boom was a kind of a revival by young people of a new spirit of revolt in various ways. People going out, boys and girls were meeting each other, start going to flag shows down the countryside. It was unheard of and was frowned upon, in fact, in that young men and women were going together. And the upsurge was also linked with campaigns for human rights, civil rights, housing, which was kind of a wake-up from the dull and dark 50s.
You had Luke coming back with these hugely expressive, passionate songs with a burning message, which, you know, Ireland had been listening to the Jimmy Shand and his Cayley Band, and, you know, Charlie Byrne and his gay guitar on, you know, Saturday afternoons on radio. And certainly you have Luke Kelly, and he's giving it large.
In Alabama in 1958, the cost of human life is very low.
You didn't need a big investment to be part of the folk tradition. You mightn't be great, but you could get yourself an old guitar, or you could sing without a guitar and be part of it.
I'd walk to work for the week to save enough petrol to get to Howth for the Saturday night gig, and it was electrifying when Kelly hit it. But he had the madness in him anyway, which lit a fire under us all, you know. The Clancys were flying high in New York, and Liam got a lot of the songs off of Luke, like the Wild Rover and that type of thing, which became very hackneyed afterwards, but it was a great song at the time.
By 1962, Luke was back home in his native city, where the Dubliners had established themselves as the leading folk group of the day. Within a year, they were signed to the premier international folk label of the time, Transatlantic Records. By now, Luke had married an Irish-American drama enthusiast, Deirdre O'Connell, who shared Luke's sense of artistic adventure. In 1964, the couple left Dublin to be with two of the leading exponents of folk music at the time, Peggy Seeger and Ewan MacColl.
I think part of the reason that I ended up in the group was because Luke left. You know, a typical Irish group will start with a split, you know. They were just getting established when Luke, restless spirit that he was, he had this hankering to go off and play around the folk clubs in England and expand his repertoire and so on. Everything changed there. Whatever influence they had, it made a big impression on him, because I think they taught him songs, or they gave him songs that we'd never heard before and nobody else had heard.
Just a note, for time is short, dear. Hard the work and long the day.
Ewan MacColl and Peggy Seeger were cultivating that idea of a vibrant working class culture. Sing out, I think, was the term they used to use, that people just sing out their grievances, sing out their loves, their hates, and be inspired by their own ability to do that. And that was the tradition of Dublin.
Luke attended workshops that MacColl gave, and I think he was quite a hard taskmaster as a teacher of, you know, how to perform and how to sing and how to get the most advantage out of your performance and so on. When he'd be home at weekends, he'd come out to Howth, where we were playing in the Royal Hotel, and it was during those occasions that I first heard him singing songs like Dirty Old Town, School Days Over, Travelling People, all these wonderful songs. You know, he could just come up on the stage and say, listen, I've just picked up a great song, Dirty Old Town, wait till you hear this.
Irish history is littered with stories of people who went away and who found something and brought it home. And had they never gone away, it never would have made any sense. We're a fascinating country that way.
He was a kind of a disciple of Ewan MacColl. I think he saw MacColl as a kind of a god, and Luke was going around spreading the gospel according to MacColl, you know.
I mean, Luke saw his singing as part of the rise of the underdog. And he gave an impetus in the city which was missing. And I think the rise of Luke and the Dubliners was very important to the development of the culture in Dublin.
Kissed my girl by the factory wall. Dirty old town, dirty old town.
He's responsible for an awful lot, Ewan MacColl is. Without him, you wouldn't have had the big folk revival in England, but then we wouldn't have had it here either, because he directly influenced Luke. So we owe Ewan MacColl a lot as well for keeping these songs alive that you just take for granted now, like, oh yeah, I know that one. You might not have known that one had they not kept it going. Without them, we wouldn't have had the Dubliners.
The Dubliners had established themselves beyond the local folk fraternity and were by now a major mainstream attraction. And this success was soon to be replicated abroad.
We'd like to continue with a song. It's called A Black Velvet Band. It's got a chorus, which you probably know. So, here's it.
Well, in a neat little town they call Belfast, apprentice to trade I was bound. Many an hour sweet happiness have I spent in that neat little town. A sad misfortune came over me, which caused me to stray from the land, far away from my friends and relations, betrayed by the Black Velvet Band. Let's hear you sing now. Her eyes, they shone like diamonds,
Luke he's one of my favourite singers of all time. I was brought up with the Dubliners. Ringing in my ears, fantastic stuff to be brought up with. So yeah, from day one.
Luke Kelly, as a name, as an individual name, I first became conscious of when I found a cassette in Ballymun where I grew up. I found a cassette on the green, and it said Luke Kelly on one side and Bob Marley on the other. And it was a collection of Dubliners songs on one side, and I had just got my first Walkman, and this was like a gift from the heavens, listening to Bob, you know, because in Ballymun there was Bob Dylan, Luke Kelly, and Bob Marley. They were like they were considered kind of the great men. Luke Kelly somehow embodied the image of the Irishman who wasn't afraid.
I would have been a schoolboy at that stage, and it would have been around 1964, and a friend of mine called John McNally in Navan played me his sister's record. It was the first time I ever heard the Dubliners. And at the time, the song just leaped out of the speakers. I just thought it was quite astonishing piece of work. Now, it was the Dubliners, but it was Luke. It was Luke's performance. It had nothing to do with whatever had come before, the Waltons programme or Baldunican or The Bachelors or any of that stuff. This was edgy, really edgy.
When I first heard him, I think it was Glen Hansard singing, scoring on his simplicity, and it was just this incredible version. I thought it was just Glen doing his bit of it, and once I looked into it and heard Luke's version, it's, you know, that's where we kind of get that Irishness in singing from. You hear that little lilt of how someone sings on the street corner, and that's Luke Kelly. He's still there.
With Luke and Ronnie Drew, the Dubliners had two distinct and immediately identifiable voices that could deliver their ever-increasing repertoire of songs. And it was Ronnie who performed their initial international success with a song that became a surprise hit for the group.
I think we were the first Irish group to get into the British charts. We learned Seven Drunken Nights from Joseph O'Haney, the Connemara traditional Shannon singer. And we thought this is a bit of a crack, you know, it's a funny bit of a ditty. Sure, we'll stick it on as a track on our LP with Major Minor when we joined up with Philip Solomons. Phil came in to listen to what we'd done in the studio one day, and when he heard Seven Drunken Nights, straight away his ears pricked up and he said, "Jeez, that's going to be your single." And we said, "Single? Seven Drunken Nights?" It seemed the most unlikely song to become a single, to us anyway, but he had connections with Radio Caroline, and it played off the air there as a single, and it got into the charts, you know, to all our amazement.
The national broadcaster actually had banned Seven Drunken Nights. I mean, that was you forget, it was the swinging 60s, and it was, you know, Flower Power and all the rest of that, but, you know, the Dubliner single was banned, and bizarre.
Up to then, we were just playing in small clubs and little folk clubs and that kind of thing. This was a totally new world we found ourselves in now. Within a short time, we were filling halls like the Royal Albert Hall in London, and Radio Caroline reached into Northern Europe as well, so we were getting invitations to play in Germany and Holland, and after a while we were playing more around Europe than we were at home or in England, you know.
The Dubliners had shown that you could have folk music and jigs and reels and, you know, folk songs and ballads, and you could wind up, you know, playing the Albert Hall and playing on top of the Pops. So, I mean, that was always, you know, there was a bar there that people, Irish people could get across, you know, if it was anyway half decent.
Luke was one of us. Ronnie was one of us. The Dubliners, they were us. But to see somebody who'd done well and hear them on interviews speaking so eloquently with a strong accent, to me that was something to aspire to. And that's partly why I'm very proud to keep my accent. It's who I am, you know, it's just where I'm from. And Luke and the Dubliners definitely gave Dublin a huge sense of pride back to just being yourself.
Luke's commitment to his socialist beliefs and internationalist values found further expression when his wife Deirdre O'Connell opened the Experimental Focus Theatre in 1967.
He had that other, you know, a few other strings to his artistic bow, you know. I mean, with Deirdre, he had actually set up the Focus Theatre, which small bespoke theatre, but it cost money, and also into the Ireland of the time, it brought international plays, American and European plays, which, you know, give people an opportunity to see them. And of course, her Stanislavski method, you know, informed a lot of the acting community who went on to do great stuff.
I still meet some of her former students. Tom Hickey, for example, and Sabina Higgins, our president's wife. She's also a great actress and one of Deirdre's former pupils. But whenever there was funds needed for the building, I don't think there was any great arts grants in those days or any great official recognition of what the likes of Deirdre was doing. And the Dubliners would be rounded up by Luke. Come on, lads, we have to get a few bob for Deirdre and the Focus. We'll put on a few gigs, and we often raised funds for them when they were needed like that, you know.
By 1969, the Dubliners were broadening their musical horizons, and the management drafted in a young and successful writer-producer to work on a new album.
Phil Coulter at that time, let's not forget, was doing things like the Bay City Rollers, if not the Bray City Rollers, and he was... you know, he was doing a lot of, I suppose, what would be seen as fluff, but he was a very gifted man. And I remember how excited he was to be working with the Dubliners. These were serious people.
Writing Puppet on a String or Congratulations, that's one set of skills. Writing a song like Scorn Not His Simplicity, you still need the same skills, but you're calling out something completely different, which is in there. And what you're doing is you're kind of opening up. You're peeling back layers of yourself, of your own emotions and of your own kind of personal history, and you're letting people in. Now, that didn't come easy for me, and if I hadn't had Kelly there continually pushing me, maybe I would never have done it. But when my first son was born with Down syndrome, it was kind of, I suppose, some sort of therapy for me to write a song about it. It took a few months before I could even confront the whole event and the whole experience. But I remember really well when I played the song to Kelly. And I could just tell by the look in his eye that, and a kind of smile that he knew he'd gotten through to me and that I'd made that step.
How she cried, tears of happiness, yea, the doctor told her it's a boy.
Scorn Not His Simplicity is a song my mother adored, and when we were kids we heard it a lot. Put that voice against that song and the song is amazing. You know, put someone else's voice against that song and it's probably not going to work as well. I think it's an amazing song.
Only he knows how to face the future, hopefully surrounded by despair.
That song is amazing. I mean, you can only write that through your own experiences, and that's a heartbreaking song and a beautiful song, and a gorgeous tribute from a father to a son. But Luke delivered it.
Scorn not his simplicity, but rather try to love him all the more.
That's soul. That's heart and soul in that song. Unbelievable. I challenge you to watch that performance and listen to that and not have a lump in your throat. And I know he didn't perform it often, and so it almost makes, you know, when you watch that piece of footage, it makes it all the more magic, you know. It's a moment in time and it's emotion. To me, that's one of my favourite performances of any song by anybody ever. That's definitely my top 5.
He was an astonishing stylist. And Luke, in a way, as a stylist, he was an interpreter. And I know, in fact, he actually chose his songs very carefully as well. He didn't have a huge, extensive repertoire of any old twaddle. They were handpicked for a reason, and they were his reasons. There were songs that he felt that he could work with and that he could get something out of, or that there was something in that he wanted to share.
I met my love by the gasworks close, dreamed a dream by the old canal.
I want to be like Luke. Luke was able to sing with that working class Dublin accent, strong, and sound phenomenal. And that was very important for me as a kid, as a Dublin kid, because there was nobody else that I can remember that sang like that I could relate to.
He had a habit sometimes of taking risks with a song. You know, he'd stretch a note a little bit beyond where it was written and leave you a little bit worried. He created a certain tension between himself and the listener and left you a little bit worried that he wasn't going to make it in time into the next line. But by some magical gift that he had, he always just did exactly that. He put his hallmark, I think, on everything that he recorded. You know, every song that he recorded somehow became the definitive version for other people to learn from, you know, and they look to Luke in that respect.
There's not many baritones and kind of low tenors that make it as big voices, but he really had that huge voice that could just project from the back of the room and fill the space.
In my memory, I will always see the town that I have loved so well.
When I was writing The Town I Love So Well, there was only one voice that was in my mind as I was writing. And the evolution of The Town I Love So Well is quite interesting because it didn't come out of the blue. I was in Derry on the weekend that internment was introduced. So at first hand, I experienced those shock waves. And it was that sense of your place being violated. And it was very traumatic. And it left a lot of angry people, including me. And so, as a knee-jerk reaction to all of that, I wrote an anti-internment song. And the very fact that it was an anti-anything will tell you that, you know, it didn't have great roots, didn't have substance. It was, as I said, knee-jerk reaction. It was off the time. And this was a song called Free the People. But Kelly was all over it like a rash as soon as he heard it. And we'd recorded it within days and released it. Now, it wasn't a great song. I'm the first one to admit that Free the People is not a great song. But it got me into that kind of space of writing about what was going on in the North and addressing political issues, which I'd never done before and may never have done had it not been for Luke Kelly. I owe a great debt to Luke Kelly. Those would be probably two of my own favourite songs, Scorn at His Simplicity and The Town I Love So Well. It's well possible that without Luke Kelly, they may never have existed.
For what's done is done, and what's won is won, and what's lost is lost and gone forever.
He was able to give voice to previous generations, you know, maybe in some case, centuries of ghosts. And bring something modern, you know, establish a modern connection with something that was very old.
The Kelly-Coulter relationship was further developed in 1973 when producer and one-time Dubliners manager Noel Pearson staged the rock opera Jesus Christ Superstar in Dublin's Gaiety Theatre. It was a groundbreaking enterprise.
It was such a ballsy production, that whole thing of putting up all these people that had never been on the theatre stage as such, like, and for Pearson to do it, it took a lot of balls, you know, and it worked. I said, Jesus Christ, Mike Murphy must have taught him how to dance. Four took him with 4 left feet, you know. It was great. But thank Jesus then he sang. So then all was forgiven, you know.
Prove to me that you're divine.
Luke's flirtation with musical theatre didn't last. Ever restless, he came across a song that would forever be associated with him and the song's writer, Patrick Kavanagh. As Luke explained in a television programme, The Humours of Donnybrook, to the programme's host, Ciarán McMahuna, and another guest, writer Benedict Kiley, in 1979.
You remember yourself meeting the Mr. Kavanagh?
Yeah, on the one occasion that I dared actually to speak to the man. But we were in a pub. We won't name the pub. I don't suppose it's allowed on television. Well, it was in the Bailey anyway. Yeah. And he was singing in his own peculiar manner, and so was I, in my own peculiar manner. And he said, "I've got a song for you." And he said, "You should sing Raglan Road." And I'm very proud of the fact that I got the imprimatur, as it were, from the man.
And you did sing it,
himself.
and you will now.
Well, I'd like to sing it now, yeah. Why not?
Luke Kelly with Al O'Donnell.
Okay.
On Raglan Road of an autumn day, I saw her first and anew.
And you know, the thing about Kavanagh, you know, you wouldn't imagine him to be an A&R man, you know, and sort of thinking, I've got a song for him, like sort of Louis Walsh, you know. I think maybe we can get somebody to sing this song. He didn't give it to anybody else. And there was, at that stage, there would have been plenty of ballad singers around the place. He gave it to Luke Kelly.
And Paddy Kavanagh, although he came from Monaghan, he captured the spirit of Dublin probably better than any poet of his time. I believe that the Raglan Road fired the imagination of Luke when he heard it, and Paddy wanted him to sing that song. So there was no argument about copyright. It was, "Why don't you sing my song, Luke?" That was Paddy Kavanagh, and was absolutely delighted when Luke recorded it.
Yeah, I remember coming on the TV and my grandmother and me ma grabbing all of us and going, "Right, watch this," and the whole family just silenced. Its integrity is just dripping off the screen. And when you've got that as a kid, as a kind of your ma going, "Well, there's the," you know, not that she ever says that, but there's the bar, you know. If you're gonna do music, you know, here's our guy, you know.
You want to be his girl when he's singing that, you know. It's just, I gave her gifts of the mind, I gave her secret signs. I mean,
thank you.
Please let that be me, Luke.
It's been sung an awful lot of time in my company, but at the right time, and Luke Kelly singing it, it is absolutely haunting, and it is the very essence of what a singer is supposed to bring to a song. He explored that song, he brought everything out of it, and brings you right into that lyric. Terrific.
And Luke's independence of spirit, natural curiosity and signature delivery has ensured a legacy that has survived well after his own lifetime.
You can hear Luke in modern Irish singer-songwriters now, 100%. And Damien Dempsey been at the fore of them for me, and I'm sure you wouldn't mind that. That's a compliment. Glen, Hansard, Paddy Casey, and all of the guys and the girls too. I'm one of them.
A hungry feeling came on me stealing, and the mice were squealing in my prison cell. And the old triangle went jingle, jangle all along the banks of the Royal Canal.
It's been a great experience for me playing with this new generation of singers who've taken up the gospel according to Luke. And And yet, you know, it's nice the fact they don't try to imitate every nuance that Luke made. That they make the song their own as well. They have their own interpretation, but influenced greatly, I think, by Luke's singing.
To begin the morning, the screw was bawling. Get up, ya bowsy, and clean up yourself. And the old triangle, when jingle jangle, all along the banks of the Royal Canal.
He was an absolute joy to be with, you know, but he also loved being a rock star. Now, he loved women. He liked, I don't think he was so much, you know, was he happy to be rich? I don't know if he was rich, but he was happy to have enough walking around money to be comfortable and for people to be glad to see him because he was quite famous. He really was enjoying life in a way that, you know, was far from the agonised sort of suffering socialist that some people might have seen him as.
And everybody knew him, of course. He was like a Dublin hero, as was Ronnie and Barney, I think, maybe as well. I had a slightly lower profile, I think, myself, but I was happy enough with that, you know.
You just look at his hair, he was on fire with passion, that man was, and he got that across. And some people can be very good performers, but not necessarily charismatic. You can't learn that. You don't lick that off the ground. That's just, you have that, or you don't, and he had it.
His recognition all the time overpowered him sometimes, you know, but because he was instantly recognisable with the mad red head and the whole 9 yards.
The sun is burning.
By the late 1970s, after many years touring and recording, Luke was beginning to experience ill health.
Alcohol was everywhere. The Dubliners were. It was expected. And most of those wanting to meet the Dubliners thought that the quickest way to their heart was to buy them drink. Was he an alcoholic? I don't know. Now, an alcoholic is somebody, I would assume, is who physiologically needs drink or they can't function. Now, I never felt that about Luke. He was much more interested in whatever book he was reading, whatever film he had seen, whatever conversation he had had. I didn't. He certainly was not obsessed by drink.
You're on the road. You live out of a suitcase, and he never really had any home life. And I love kids, and I didn't have any, which was kind of a tragedy, really. I think was look at a very gruff exterior, but it was a facade. He was as gentle as a lamb. He was a very genteel person, really. Yeah, he's a barking dog, but he'd never bite, you know.
Children tend to be an anchor in a family, I suppose. And I think the fact he didn't have any children himself, he didn't have that anchor. But he was generally a restless spirit anyway. I think he missed children himself because he was very good with kids, you know. When my own kids would be around, he'd have them up in his lap, talk to them. He had this fatherly kind of aura about him, I think.
We'd like to get back to reality now, to folk songs. This one is from Scotland. I learned from a friend of mine over there. Beautiful.
In 1983, just 3 months before he died, Luke appeared with the Dubliners on RTÉ's The Music Show. It was to be his final television performance.
I must away now. I can no longer tarry.
Middle 70s going into the 80s, I think things started to go a little bit wrong for Luke, in as much as his health started to deteriorate. I remember we went to a club in Birmingham. I looked around after a while and he was fast asleep, just fell asleep. And when it was time to go, I had to give him, come on, Luke. And he said, well, I don't feel that good. I think that was when the headaches were beginning to play. What could you say? They were starting to hurt. And I think that was the start of well, he was diagnosed with brain tumours eventually.
A lot of the time, Luke was forgetful and that, and John and I had often discussed this, and we used to think it was a gargle, you know. But sure, it was actually the tumour was growing, and his forgetfulness became more frequent.
And he didn't like anybody talking about it. I think he had a few words with our Jim. Jim's mentioned something about his health, and I don't think he was too happy about it. But maybe that was Luke. Luke wouldn't want anybody making a big fuss.
I was in Cork. I was singing in West Cork the night he collapsed on the stage in the Opera House in Cork. Then we were in Cork with him while he was hospitalised there, and fair play, the man that got him that time saved his life.
We went in to see him the next day, and he was sitting up in the bed after the operations, as right as rain. What's all the fuss about was his attitude, you know. But unfortunately, the tumour was deep-seated, and after another couple of operations, there was nothing more they could do. It kept growing again.
We all knew that this was very serious. Indeed, I met him a few times after that when he was around and very quiet. He became very reserved and very quiet. When you think of Luke singing, it was the power of his voice without a microphone, and he would throw that voice, and there was such strength and such dynamism about it that you knew immediately when you met him that was gone.
He was devoid of self-pity, no self-pity, no down. I think he considered it a nuisance and a limiting factor in his life. It really was limiting his life, and for that it was a nuisance. But there was no self-pity, no complaining, none at all. Just, that's the way the cards are dealt, and you play with the cards you have in your hand.
When he was checking into hospital for the last time, he had to fill up the usual registration form, and when it came to religion, what religion are you? Formerly he might have said, I'm a communist or an atheist, but this time he said, RC. So maybe that was one of the signs of resignation, you know.
He's the only person I ever saw on a life support machine. And I remember going home to my wife and kids, and I was crying. I said, if anything ever happens to me, don't ever put me on that thing, ever. Just let me go. And it was the worst thing I've ever seen in my life. To see him, he was such a strong body character in this total state of it was awful. I can't even describe it. And we went through the mill there when he was on that for a while. And thankfully, I wasn't there the night they pulled the plug. And I was very glad I wasn't.
A minstrel boy, you charm your way through life, enriching all who chance to pass your way. You shelter wayward spirits from the night and raise them up on wings at dawn of day. Though links with us, alas, too soon are severed, your spirit and your song will live forever.
Whitehall Church, unbelievable. It was like, well, the people, the church they couldn't hold all the people that were there.
It was national mourning almost, you know. The church out on the north side was chock-a-block. I remember having a wry smile to myself. There was like 7 priests on the altar, including my own brother, Father Joe. And I thought Kelly would have had a good smile at this. Now 7 priests celebrating his funeral. That's because he was many things, look, but gospel greedy would not have been one of them. But we all had a sense that he was gone too soon. That voice was silenced, and there's never been one like it.
There was a real a sense of a national loss, I think, that somebody very, very important had left us. And Luke had contributed so much in his short years up to his death that I think people felt there was so much more to be given there, you know, so much more for Luke to give. And that in itself was a second sense of loss, I suppose, you know, but we'd never... Luke hadn't realised his full potential, and we'd never hear all these other wonderful things that he might have done.
His death was the death of a major figure in this city, you know, and not just a great Irish figure, a Dublin figure. You know, he just resonated of Dublin walking around this city. He was just, he was a prince of the city.